as the Walt Disney Company forges ahead with its plan, seemingly undeterred, to destroy Magic Kingdom's Rivers of America and replace it with what is essentially a dirt track filled with ATVs inspired by the 2006 Pixar film Cars. The mainstream media is finally offering some much-needed criticism regarding the project, and you won't believe who might have been featured. Let's talk about Caroline Reed from Forbes detailing Disney's latest Imagineering blunder in the making here on That Park Place. You may have heard a little story in which Disney is paving over paradise, putting in a parking lot. Now, it's more like, Rivers of America, and that parking lot is a dirt track. Maybe it's even worse now that I think about it. We'll get into it right here.
It's kind of strange because, they're really going uncivilized, and
yes, uncivilized indeed. Yeah. For a more uncivilized age. Forbes! Disney's facing furious backlash over $17 billion theme park investments. This is the largest media outlet that has covered this specific story, which is why we're covering again, because it is a big deal. And not maybe because we were featured in it. We'll get into that as well. This is by Caroline Reed! April 2nd. 2025, Disney's Magic Kingdom in Orlando has long been known as the most magical place on Earth, but fans and industry luminaries have warned that incoming changes could cast a dark spell on the historic theme park. What dark spell is that? Well, I'm going to skip ahead here because it gets into a lot of it. But here we go. I want to start off right here. Disney owns so much land at Walt Disney World in Orlando that it can lock out competitors and can control the standards in the area around its parks there. As anyone who has visited its sprawling site knows, that the fantasy environment doesn't just end when guests step out of the park gates. The resort is home to more than 25 hotels, compared to just 3 in California. In addition, there are 3 golf courses, a Mediterranean-themed youth sports complex, and a shopping and dining district designed to look like an early 1900s town from Central Florida. They are all connected by roads which run next to manicured grass verges with topiary trees scattered along the landscaping. The road signs are bespoke to Disney, and even the fire station has an eye-catching artificial hose which wraps around the building and leads into a fountain. Wow, that is very descriptive. Caroline. She was getting the words in here, which is fantastic. She does excellent reporting. It all contributes to what the mouse refers to as the Disney bubble, and it is made possible thanks to Walt's game-changing realization that the caliber of the area surrounding the parks is just as important as the attractions in them. In fact, I believe he called it, the blessing of size. Is that right, Colter?
That's right. 100%. Yeah. And he understood that the environment in which you are in contributes greatly to the perception of your entire experience. And he knew that because Disneyland was not blessed with size.
No, it was not. It was not blessed with size at all. But remember, he bought as much land as he could afford out in California. But now that he was much more successful back in the 1960s, he was like, okay, let's go ahead and really get a lot of land. A total of 2,825 acres are reportedly suitable for development, with a further 2,256 acres described as marginally suitable. It is one of the reasons why Disney's chief executive Bob Iger said last year that we have thousands of acres of lands to develop. We could actually build 7 new full lands if we wanted to around the world. Now, this quote right here is very interesting because that is not what the Walt Disney Company said. On September 19, 2023, when they actually talked about how much land that they have and what their plans were for the future, which we'll go over in more detail in just a few, it said this: in fact, Disney Parks has over 1,000 acres of land for possible future development to expand theme park space across its existing sites. The equivalent of about 7 new Disneyland parks. It's very interesting. That's even more land than just big lands like Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, for example, only encompassing about 14 acres. So that's very, very crucial to the story right here. The dark clouds began to gather in 2023 when Disney's studio division was suffering as the SAG-AFTRA strikes delayed production and blockbuster spending on dedicated Disney Plus streaming content had generated hefty losses in its direct-to-consumer division right here. I'm going to skip ahead just a bit. In a bid to boost Disney's stock price, its chief executive Bob Iger and Josh D'Amaro, chairman of its experiences division, got out their magic wands. In September 2023, they revealed that over the next decade, Disney's investment in experiences would nearly double to roughly $60 billion. As this report explained, it failed to enchant investors. On the day that Disney announced the investment, its stock crashed by 2.35%, close in at $81.94. It didn't stop there, however. And just 15 days later, it fell again, closing at $79.32, its slowest price in almost a decade. But Disney wasn't deterred. Culture, I want to stop right there for just a second. Why do you think stock price hit a little bit there? And why weren't investors necessarily enchanted with $60 billion over the next 10 years?
Well, because it really just looks like normal CapEx for the parks. It doesn't look like anything beyond that. It looks like just an operational budget item at this point. And that's really kind of the most off-putting thing. We called it out for what it was at the time. This is not really truly an investment. If anything, they're going to be looking for ways to reduce their capital expenditures while they're quote unquote expanding. Well, expansion insinuates with the very word that you're going to grow a given area. That is certainly not what they plan to do. They're going to redevelop things that are beloved and reduce operational costs at the same time, all to service some ridiculous perspective that new is always better. Well, the surrounding area, if you consider Walt's words, like you brought up to begin with, or Caroline Reed brought up to begin with, this is the exact opposite of what Walt said. This is the exact opposite of the philosophy he espoused. And as we've pointed out, and many people, including Eddie Soto, has pointed out, there's no reason to do what's about to be done.
Exactly right there. $60 billion over the next 10 years averages out to about $6 billion a year. Now compare that to the $30 billion that they spent in 2021 and again in 2022 just on entertainment content alone. And you can see why that disparity as investors did the math. Well, that wasn't super impressive. And again, a lot of their theme park revenue, in fact, a third of all their profit for the theme parks actually comes from Walt Disney World Resort. You can see right here from Q1 fiscal year 2024 just how much the experiences division contributed to the overall profit of the Walt Disney Company. So spending a lot less was, not that great.
It's short-sightedness. I mean, because we know what's coming down the street and just how and just how short-sighted they have been in everything for the last 15 years. You and I have had this conversation, I think, multiple times. So, yeah.
Well, yes. We'll go ahead and summarize this just briefly right here. So at D23 2022, D23 Expo that is, they said, hey, beyond Big Thunder, we can dream beyond Big Thunder. Wouldn't it be amazing to see what we can actually achieve out there? And it's like, oh, okay, that sounds good. They also brought up the idea of a Villain's Land. The crowd went wild. Great stuff. At 2024's D23 Ultimate Fan Event now, Josh Chimaro came out on stage and said, hey, we're getting a Cars Land. Isn't this amazing? Look at this fantastic artwork. And beyond that, we'll get a Villain's Land as well. Well, 2 days later, after the event had already concluded, they decided to drop a bomb on us. Although the theme wasn't a surprise, the location of the Cars Land was. Based on the concept art, the dirt track of the Flash attraction appeared to be replacing the beloved Rivers of America along with its island and steamboat. It left fans in a state of shock, and it wasn't until February this year that it started to get real. The catalyst was Disney receiving official approval from the South Florida Water Management District to make fundamental changes to the Rivers of America and Tom Sawyer's Island. It was clear that they were moving forward with their plans and that they weren't going to embark on a U-turn when it came to them posting a video that showed this dirt track and these ATVs going over. It was terrible. Nobody wants this to replace Rivers of America, wrote an incisive theme park industry commenter, WW Pro. Another observer called John replied to Disney's post saying, quote, no one wants this, a sentiment which was echoed widely, with Kate Fisher adding, I don't know how we can make this any clearer to you. We don't want this. A lot of people came out against this, and not only people, but also industry experts, people who have worked for the mouse for a considerable amount of time, like you said, Culture, not only Jim Shull, which has become a little bit more opinionated as time has gone on, but also Eddie Sato, who doesn't usually throw his hat into this ring very much, but in this, he was opinionated. Crucially, Shaw posted a map showing that the Cars Land could be integrated into Frontierland without removing the Rivers of America, the island, and the steamer along with it. This is my concept to keep Rivers of America while adding a Cars Land. Eddie Sato did the same, and you can see those concepts right here on screen right now of what these things would look like if the company would embark on a project that would preserve these things. Culture, to have industry experts like Eddie Sato, Jim Shaw, people who have been working in this field for quite some time, who are very established, work for the company itself, to come out against this project. I mean, this is a big deal.
Well, hey, I promise you that if we were allowed to hear from, Mr. Baxter, we'd hear the same thing. I mean, this is really going to destroy the ambiance of that entire area and the whole idea of the frontier. This is not a frontier. They're gonna. This is something you could certainly move elsewhere. It's just you wouldn't have to destroy this if you wanted to make some kind of a dirt track. It's been pointed out 1,000 times. I know that these skilled Imagineers and these minds are going about putting this out there, but at the same time, why not leave it alone? There is no reason to do anything to it. Just leave it alone. And beyond Big Thunder should be an actual Radiator Springs. That's a popular attraction. It's a popular area. If you built Radiator Springs, you would have an attraction count that would increase. They're not doing that. Again, this is an operational decision. They want to cut the budget while claiming to expand the park. That's not what's going to happen. And the Villains Land is misplaced as well. It should be directly tangentially located to New Fantasyland. They had two spots in which they could facilitate that they aren't taking advantage of. Alternately, you have additional space if you relocate something to another place where it makes sense in the park. If they moved Small World and did a beautiful topiary garden, the whole 9 yards, designed after the original Disneyland building, they could relocate it to Epcot where it would fit, because it would be part of that whole beautiful plan that they've partially abandoned. And then you would have additional ways to get to quote unquote Villains Land and access to the backstage area that's really just a parking lot and maintenance stuff. Everything that's backstage back there, for the most part, can be relocated. If they needed to use already developed or partially developed land, that would be your option. None of this is, and here's the problem. That entire area there leading to the back waterway, the flood control canal that's back there, that's open and buildable. There is really no reason to do any of this. So the fact that the great minds of these former Imagineers are, put to work to this, just in their spare time to try to, convince Disney this is the wrong path, I think it's great effort on their part. They understand what the park is about, but again, Disney is about destroying America, quite literally, but also here, figuratively. They're destroying Rivers of America and all of the frontier feeling that makes you long to have experienced that time. But Disney's not going to be a place where you're going to be able to experience that time, even in a very cleaned up and idealized fashion, which is what this area was. You're not going to find this kind of serenity anywhere else in the park. And that's, again, it's the Iger bots that have destroyed this company. So anyway, I can go on and on because I'm just that irritated about it. But if Tony Baxter were allowed to speak and or have gotten his way with Splash Mountain, none of this disaster would have happened. None.
I don't disagree. I want to go ahead and end this segment off with this quote right here and pontificate just a little bit further. I think Culture really included some amazing points right there. There's no doubt about the river, boat, and island They present a peaceful contrast to the rest of the park with its cuddly characters and bustling rides based on movies. This responding to Eddie Soto, who said, "You can keep the river and have the cars. Importantly, losing the river is not just about nostalgia. It's a subconscious contrast that gives the other lands the immersive impact that they have. Sleek metal future versus the vast, untamed nature, chocolate and peanut butter. Stepping from one into another makes the immersion experience fun and impossible." Even in energy level, parks are now adding decompression lawns, but the river and Tom Sawyer's Island played that role for decades. Parks should be designed holistically and emotionally. That's what Eddie Soto wrote right there. And I believe Caroline Reed concurs. WW Pro and other expert pundits at That Park Place concur as well and describe the rivers of America as, quote, offering a peaceful break from the increasingly commercialized park landscape. These areas, originally inspired by Walt Disney's vision for Disneyland, are some of the last remnants of Disney's storytelling-driven approach to theme parks. Here's the thing. This is not a storytelling concept here. This is a way to placate investors, reduce operating costs for these theme parks, and it is management and creative decisions by spreadsheet, not by storytelling, not by creative. So whenever, you hear Bob Iger says, "Oh, we're a storytelling company. We're so story-driven." No, they're not. Like Pro said last night, Bob Iger is just trying to get the next quarter. Well, go ahead.
I've been making this point for a while, Vash. The reason that Iger makes me cringe so often is because he says, "Well, we're a data-driven company." Blech. Because your data is driving you to make the worst decisions imaginable. And again, he's not a creative; he's a weatherman. So I guess maybe he's creative about thinking he knows what the weather's going to be tomorrow, but he quite literally is a weatherman. And you are actually allowing a fake journalist to lead this company for as long as he has. And the end result of every decision he's made has led to complete disaster.
Yeah. I mean, it's there's no question about it now. And so when you look at his statements juxtaposed by earlier comments in this article, that's why I went over the investor stuff, because that's who they're trying to placate. They're not trying to placate the guests. Try to placate investors, and just long enough for Iger just to get out of there and preserve as much of his legacy intact as possible, because that's really what he most cares about. Not Walt Disney's legacy, his own. And it's really, really unfortunate. And hopefully Disney does take a U-turn on this. This is the biggest media outlet that we've ever seen talk about Rivers of America. So maybe things are heading in the right direction. But who knows? I mean, they seem to be developing a lot for this, and they seem to have already spent millions on research trips and ride development, R&D, and so forth. I know.
How they spent millions on research? Dude, they went out and rented quads or gators. So they went and got some gators, and they went out to a high desert location that's beautiful in the area near Sedona, Arizona. And played around on the gators. That's their freaking research. It's not like they went down Route 66 with the last creative idea that they had that was good was Lassiter's. And, outside of that, they've always had to rely on outside people. Nobody internally now knows anything about being an actual genuine Imagineer. Because Imagineering is made up of something like 187 different disciplines, people that can work together to a creative endeavor. But that spirit of cooperation and the creative thought process has been abandoned there for a long time. And I thought maybe Bruce Vaughan would maybe re-kickstart that. But to be fair, towards the end of his first swing there, he wasn't exactly very creative. He was too far into the, management by Iger ideas. And I hate this, Vash, more than you could imagine, but I'm just going to say Imagineering is now over at Universal. That's what it is.
Indeed. I don't disagree. And by the way, Imagineering's latest theme park innovation, well, that opens May 22nd, 2025 down the road at Epic Universe.
Thanks for watching That Park Plays News. For more information, consider checking out www.thatparkplace.com. And don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and send this out on your favorite social media account.